can do it on time. I'll get you down at the portal.
Right now, I'm not going to be plan is to not give you cards since you're closing. Do you want time or
Do I want what?
time?
I'm going to be keeping track here.
Because it doesn't matter to since you're closing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you any cards.
No, give me the cards.
You want them?
I may take them for informational purposes, but in case that I've kind of gone off rails, it's always nice to know that I'm.
Alright, I'll be right in the front.
Yeah, you don't have. You can only have to do like the 10. Just give me the like near the 10 point. Yeah,
sounds good. All right.
That'll remind me that I don't have forever.
Okay. All right, y'all good.
Hey, can everybody hear me? Everybody there? All right. Hey, how's it going, everyone? Woo, woo. Everyone have a good day so far? Yeah. All right. So I know I'm competing with food and drinks and weed up here. So I'm going to try to do my best to keep this concise. But what I've actually done today, it's really hard for me to speak for 45 minutes on one topic. So I've tried to make 2 shorter talks that fit together. If we get to the second talk and we're over time, I'll just drop it. But I'm going to try to get through all of it today for you here. So, oh wait a minute, it's not showing you presenters notes. Oh man, like the most critical initial failure, right, is how do you show your presenters notes? And of course, I'm gonna totally fail up here in figuring out how to do it. What's the secret, guys? How do you tell it to show your notes? I heard like 8 answers, and none of them. Show navigator. I mean, this is the intersection of design and technology. Custom land. Oh, wow, okay. Wow, you'd think I'd never done this before. Okay, cool. So my name is Josh Micheals. I'm going to skip talking about myself and jump right into what I'm here today to talk about. And yeah. So my tendency for these talks is to find something about Apple or the App Store that people are complaining about in the blogs, and then try to basically invalidate those complaints. Because the vast majority of things that people complain about in the blogs about Apple are in fact those own people's fault, and they're simply complaining about Apple because they have no one else to blame. Sorry guys. So. There was an article earlier this year. I'm not going to talk about where from the specifics, but the essence of the article and the title was "Pop Apps Killed the Indie Stars," and the core of the article was saying that because all the apps in the App Store now are popular apps, they're for everyone. They're Candy Crush. They're these things that are really pop. Indies don't have a chance anymore, and so this really confused me because pop and indie are not opposites. When you say pop, you're talking about a work that appeals to a very wide audience. You can have indie that's pop, and you can have corporate that's pop. But indie and pop are not opposite of each other. Now, the king of pop, of course, was the greatest of all time at this. I mean, it's truly magical the extent to which Michael Jackson was able to appeal to everybody. Everybody. Like, how many performers do you know who have the capacity to appeal to everybody? Andy Warhol, before Michael Jackson, was also fantastic at this. And one thing to point out, the Marilyns, which Warhol is very well known for, were not just randomly created because one day he was like, hey, I'm going to paint Marilyn Monroe. It was created because the day Marilyn Monroe died, Warhol's gallerist contacted him and said it might be a good idea to make paintings of Marilyn. So this extremely famous set of paintings worth a ton of money that was created in an opportunistic context to basically exploit a star who had just died. And that's Warhol for you, right? And Warhol, independent and pop. Macklemore, independent and pop, right? It's possible to both appeal to everyone and be indie at the same time. Now, does that mean that's what you should do? Hard to say, but that's what this talk is going to center on. So the opposite of pop is not indie, it's niche or niche. It turns out both of those are legitimate pronunciations. If you've ever wondered which was right, if you want to sound smarter, I think you say niche, but it really doesn't make a difference. But niche is work that appeals to very limited audiences. And I'll say right up front that the artists, musicians, performers in general that I appreciate the most and I like the most are artists who are niche, who appeal to a smaller audience. I really like that form. That's me. Okay, Saul Williams is like my absolute favorite person in the whole world. Poet, musician, artist, all around. So much of what I do is inspired by him. Before I started Saul, I was really into this artist Tricky, whose message really resonated with me. Both of these individuals are independent, both operate generally without contracts. These are now niche artists who are indie. So it's possible to be pop and indie, and it's possible to be niche and indie. So let's do the standard conference thing and put this up on a graph. So, along the top you've got indie and corporate, and along the side you've got niche and pop. And right at the kind of intersection of niche and pop is niche pop, which would be popular, but for a relatively small audience compared to everyone. But it's easier to look at this graph just thinking like as you go to the right, your company size is getting bigger, and as you go up, your audience size is getting bigger. So where can indies play in this matrix? If you're a 1-person, 2-person, 3-person indie shop, where can you play on this matrix of company size and audience size? Well, the safest place to play, but not necessarily the easiest, is apps that are indie and very niche. And there are a number of talks. Jay Saplinski does a fantastic job looking at this, about apps that solve very specific problems for customers who are willing to pay significant amounts of money. Right? This is great because you're making an app for a small number of customers, not 1 million, not 2 million, not 5 million, right? If you're an indie, it's very hard to support that many people. And because they're willing to pay, you're actually going to make money. So in terms of places where you can focus, making things for a very targeted, specific audience that you know that you understand well is a way to play. I'm not going to go too deep on here because there's a lot of really other good talks on this topic. The next place where I think indies can play, but I think is more challenging, is at the niche pop level. So apps that solve general problems for mid-size audiences, but that don't go after everyone in the entire world. So I would say that Fantastic Cal is a perfect example of something that fits at this point. Calendaring is something that everybody does. Not everybody wants a special calendar, but that is an example of an indie making an app which is niche pop and that costs money and does pretty well. So this is starting to get harder, but I don't know. I can't really say relatively how much harder, but I think it's starting to get harder because now you've got more customers. They're probably paying you a little bit less. And then what I would kind of consider the hardest for indies is apps for everyone. Apps that are truly pop, truly universal. The apps that are #1 free in the App Store and have millions after millions of installs. This is hard because if you have millions and millions and millions of installs, that's a lot of people you got to deal with. And if you're trying to keep your company small, if you're trying to stay indie, it's very hard to do that when you're increasing your customer base by potentially 1 million people a day. So I like to play in this space. This is where I like to play. I play between there and niche pop, and I go back and forth. And let me tell you, it is hard. I can't really give a relative hardness, but my goal today is to kind of communicate the differences between the challenges at this different level. And to do this, let's start by analyzing another product. It's so easy to make fun of Google Glass. It's like eventually I'm going to stop doing this. But in this situation, it does a great job helping us understand what happens when you misunderstand your markets. So can anybody point out to me on this graph where you would say the market for Google Glass is? What quadrant? Bottom right. Bingo, 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 bingo. Bottom right. The actual market of people who want to strap a computer to their face in that way is very, very tiny. Okay? However, Google designed it for everyone. They're like, we think this is the future and everyone's going to wear these face computers. And then the design they made from the product all the way through to kind of the key features is all stuff for which, like, if you were going after a niche market, you wouldn't do. If you're going after a niche market, you build for what that market wants. You don't build for everybody. So, classic mistake, and at the corporate level, it's one that you can really only make if you're the guy in charge. Because if you're pitching a product where you're like, well, this is for a niche market, and it's not, well, you can't really pull that off. So, well, here's the thing. In Google's case here, they really tried to legitimize this by going out into the fashion world, right? This was like news just a couple years ago. It wasn't, well, maybe it was funny then too. But this shows the mismatch further, right? This shows them going out in their marketing and their branding and trying to reach the wrong audience. And it's so easy to make fun of Google, but basically the same problem exists here. Basically the same problem. Where does the Apple Watch fit? Bottom right? Except I can be a little bit more specific about the people who are really enjoying the watch. Fitness enthusiasts, health trackers, those folks love the watch. I own a watch, and I snowboard, and I would not go on the mountain without it anymore. I consider it my most expensive and most indispensable snowboarding accessory, which says a little bit. But in the case of Apple, I don't think the mistake they made was as big. But they designed kind of for the fashion market and a little more pop, and not everyone, but it was still a major mismatch. Like, if Apple knew what they knew today about how this rolled out, they'd probably focus the watch more on health and fitness, and that seems to be what's happening. And that's the difference between Apple and Google here. Apple kind of recognized this mismatch, started realigning their product, and so things went. But that didn't stop the fact that the way we were sold on the watch was like famous people, like celebrities, right? Like there's Dre in some Apple private jet. There's Will.i.am. Apparently this guy is knows how to make apps. I don't think he's ever made one, but he's running that TV show. I just don't get it. But really, like, why are we showing these people for a fitness product? We should be showing these people. Like, if you're a fitness person and you're aspiring to fitness, you want other fitness people to be the ones who are pushing the message. And Apple also figured that out too. So I've given you two examples of both how Apple and Google have made very basic mistakes in misunderstanding the markets that they're pitching to and how they pitch to them. So now the question is, where does your product sit? How do you know whether or not you're in alignment with the market that you're going after? And so I'm going to kind of walk you through an exercise that I use personally to help figure this out. And to do it, we're going to use virtual reality, or particularly the Oculus as the method for talking about it. So virtual reality is hot, right? Like, it's super pop and hot, and everybody's into it. And okay, so let's assume that 100% of people want VR. We know this isn't true, but let's assume that 100% of people want an Oculus Rift, okay? Well, in the United States, 75% of people use vision correction. 64% of those people wear glasses. Well, guess what a lot of these VR makers forgot to design for? But wait, Google forgot that too, because they didn't come up with a way to put their... So wait, you just cut out 64% of people for wearing glasses. Like, notice that generally, culturally, we're trying to move towards including people with any kind of disability, yet somehow in this world you're able to just exclude very standard disabilities, and that's just okay. Well, it's not. It's going to really make it hard to adopt. So, VR also makes a lot of people sick. Let's just guess 10%, right? Let's just guess 10%. It's probably more like 90, but let's guess 10. And VR often requires a high-end PC. Anyone here with a high-end PC? All right, a few folks. Awesome. All the rest of us with Macs were just screwed because Oculus decided that. So what happens, right? If you start with 100% of people wanting VR, you say, well, only 36% of people don't wear glasses, and 90% of people don't get sick, and let's say 10% have an adequate PC. By the end of that, you're down to just 3.24% of people who might be your customers, who might, if they want your product. But let's say that not 100% of people want VR, but rather 1% of people want VR. Now you're down to a very infinitesimal quantity of folks that you're selling to. So who's left to buy VR? And can you build a business off selling a product which works for so few people? Maybe you can, maybe you can't, I don't know, but I don't have the $1 billion to put in and find that out. Facebook does, and let them have fun with that, but I'll tell you, I'll know when VR might be getting interesting, when people who wear glasses can use it, when people don't get sick when they use it, and when you don't need a high-end Alienware computer to take advantage of it. Okay, so let's take this over to thinking about apps. Let's take the same approach for an app. Let's assume that 100% of people with a compatible device want your paid app. Well, to start off with, between 75% and 95% of people just will not pay for apps. Period, full stop. What the exact number is depends on the app store you're in and the particular product category that you're selling on, but basically the vast majority of people won't pay for apps. I used to survey audiences when I came to Apple iOS developer events, like how many people here are willing to pay for apps, and it was just depressing because nobody would. And like, wait, we're building apps, we should want to pay for them, but a lot of us fall into this same category. So 75-90% won't pay. And then only 40% of app users speak English. So with just those 2 points, let's walk it down. 100% everyone wants your app, that's assumed. 25% are willing to pay. 40% speak English. Before they've even considered what your app is, you've eliminated 90% of people. That may be okay. That may be fine. But don't expect that you're going to have the #1 free app when you've cut 90% of the market out before they've even considered what it is that you're trying to sell them. It's a very common mistake. Now, everybody disses on Flappy Bird, but Flappy Bird actually got it right. You didn't have to pay, and you didn't need to know any language because the game didn't require language to play. So if Flappy Bird had charged money, that whole thing wouldn't have happened. Wouldn't have happened. But in this case, for better or worse, that's how it worked out. So rule number 1 when thinking about making pop apps is to minimize major barriers to adoption. Anything which is going to cut out a significant portion of your potential customer base, you really need to think seriously about whether or not to include it. And I'm going to give some examples here, but you can imagine these yourself. Requiring a login or registration on first run. Oh my goodness, I can't believe apps still do this. Like anytime I open an app and it asks me for a login or a register before I've done anything, I'm like, I don't know you. Requiring specific versions of iOS, sometimes that's okay, sometimes it's not. Specific hardware features, accessories, knowledge of specific language, or upfront payment. These are all potential barriers, but there's no shortage. The purpose of this activity is to help you think about how to go from the assumption that the whole world might buy your app down to a realistic understanding of how many people might buy that app, to help you kind of better guess where this thing might go. So where this is really important is with business model. So pop rule number 2 is that you need to design your business model for your market. Let's go back to these 3 points. If you're building indie and niche, you're going to be building paid apps that include subscriptions, and in very rare cases, it might be appropriate to offer a free trial. But this is the space where you can charge $20 and get away with it, 50 or 100 on Mac. You can charge a lot of money on Mac in this space. So if you try to do freemium, or you try to do coins or credits, in that little corner, good luck. It's like, add another slide to your keynote for 2 coins. That doesn't work. Okay, so if you're indie and you're making a niche product at a very target audience, high price plus subscription is really very often the way to go. Moving up, if you're niche pop, if you're Fantastical, or you are a weather app and you're trying to go after a bigger audience. My personal take is that it needs to be paid plus an IAP or a subscription. Some people call this cheapium. I think that makes it sound lame because this is actually people making money love using this. It really works. So in this case, the reason for this is that if you make it free, you're now opening yourself up to 10 times more customers that you have to support who are not paying you. And then if they don't like it, then you're not getting anything at all. So I think a very common mistake at the niche pop point is to do free with IAP and subscription. I actually really don't think it works. And then finally, if you're going all in, if you're trying to really reach everyone, you have to be free to start. Because otherwise you've cut out a massive part of the market. And the way that you get really big is by going viral, not just on Twitter, but word of mouth. And if somebody tells you, hey, you have to check out this app and it costs $3.99, you've just killed one of your leads right there. So if you're going for the top, if you're trying to be #1 free app, this is the only way to fly. There's no other way to do it. And I think people very commonly make this kind of misunderstanding. So the problem with going at that scale is that as your business grows, it's going to be pushing your company to grow. And if your goal is to stay in indie business and to stay small, that's going to be really hard to do if you're getting more and more customers. So audience size is also not constant, right? The App Store went on iPhone from being something for a million people to was a couple hundred million now, right? And you'd have to scale your business along that whole line. So I consider that upper area very dangerous to play in if you're trying to stay small, because playing in the appeal to everyone space is going to be hard to do as a indie, but you can do it. All right, pop rule number three, appeal to as wide of an audience as possible. This is where we're going to talk about the concept of universal appeal. Can anybody tell me what this thing is? Oh my goodness, awesome. Can anyone tell me the kind of wombat? All right, so this is the northern hairy-nosed wombat. It is the most rare species on our planet right now that we track and know of. There are about 115 of them left. And you are absolutely entitled and welcome to make a game about the wombat. Totally cool, totally fine. Problem is, how many people know what this is or have an understanding of this animal or the narrative? Now, anyone tell me what this is? Come on, bird, yeah. So why are there so many apps with birds? Right? Exactly, everyone knows what a bird is, and it has a very positive narrative associated with it. Look at this, it's a dove. It looks like it's about to save you, right? Like, birds have a very positive narrative and a very universal appeal. Birds exist in most places on Earth, right? All right, call it out. What else is this big? What else is as big as birds? Cats, boom. Easy. What else? Bugs, pretty good, yep. All right, so fruit, sugar, zombies, ninjas, zombies versus ninjas. The Bible has a massive following. And it's not appealing to everybody, but it's appealing to a giant market. And then finally, my favorite, the Earth, which as far as I understand is the single most universal image which can exist. There is no image you can pick better than some variation of this one that will appeal more to a wider percentage of the population. And of course, Steve Jobs knew this, because he was a huge fan of the whole Earth catalog. And it was no surprise that the first iPhone's lock screen looked quite a bit like the Earth catalog. So when thinking about anything that involves a theme, and this is more in kind of the game space, but it applies all over, you have to think about how many people understand that theme and how many people it appeals to. You're welcome to make an app about whatever you want. But if you're trying to reach everyone, you've got to use themes and concepts that can reach everyone. So from a more practical point of view, let's talk about what I call universal mobile scenarios. These are situations that very large number of people use their phone for. Calendaring, okay? Fantastical, indie app. Weather, my radar, indie app. Making your selfies look good. Facetune, indie app. These are all three examples of highly successful indie apps built in the niche pop and pop space. And many of these are just from at least this one is just from the last 2 years. So it is possible. All right, we're running low on time, so I'm going to skip a couple things. Product market fit, money, Silicon Valley. All right, so indies succeed by working smarter and not harder, and we succeed by spending less and not more. And it's one thing if you're spending somebody else's money to gamble on whether or not your app will be successful, then do what you want. It's their money. But if you're gambling your own money on it, I think it's a hard gamble to take unless you're really thinking about how many people the app appeals to. Ignoring market fundamentals is very risky. I love the dream of you come up with an idea and then it magically reaches millions of people. More often than not, you come up with an idea and it goes nowhere. If you don't think about the market, you're taking a big risk. Now, this is the point where I think a lot of people tend to get upset. and me too, because I'm in this to build things I love. I'm in this to create experiences that will help people. I'm in this to express myself through software. So the thing that kind of comes up here is the S word, selling out. And again, as any other good presentation, I went to dictionary.com and got the definition. Selling out is a common idiomatic prerogative expression for the compromising of a person's integrity, morality, authenticity, or principles in exchange for personal gain or money. Well, it's hard to make money and not compromise at all to make money. That's really, really hard to do. So if you want to call that selling out, great. I call that I run an indie business that works and has been around for 8 years. Okay? There's no requirement to make money when you build an app. And one of the most powerful things in the App Store is that it's open to anyone, anywhere in the world to create anything they want, distribute it worldwide onto hundreds of millions of devices. That is incredible power. And you don't have to constrain what you build by the need to make money. But if you need to make money, you can't ignore the realities here. The market has no obligation to pay you. No obligation to you. So to make money, you might have to compromise. And this leads us to the second talk, and I'm going to have to rush through it, but I'm going to try my best on a situation where I found myself in a compromising scenario and how I dealt with it and thought about it. The second presentation is titled Taking Over a Television Network. So I haven't talked about myself yet. My core apps are a series of products called Magic Window. We started with this app on the iPad when it first launched, and the idea was that you could turn your iPad into a window with beautiful views all over the world. Now, from day one, this was an app meant for Apple TV. Like from day one, we knew it, we wanted it. Like the thing we wanted it just this whole time was to build for Apple TV, and we tried as best we could to support Apple TV through AirPlay. But as you know, AirPlay basically doesn't work. So when the new Apple TV came out, I was like, let's go. Let's go. Let's do this. We have been waiting for years and years and years to make this happen. Let's go. Let me start finding out the details. Well, you got 4 weeks. 4 weeks between when Apple gives you an SDK and the store opens, except you don't know that because Apple didn't even say when the store was going to open. So you're working with your deadline of sometime in October. You got to do everything, 0 to ship in that time. To me, this is like the Tough Mudder of software. This is hardcore as it gets. All right. And the first thing I had to figure out, as should be the case for people interested in money, was the business model. We've got a new platform. We don't understand what business models work and what business models don't. We have to guess whether paid, free, subscription, any of these combinations work. There's no precedent to look at for how to do this. So we had to look at the history of our apps and try to figure out what business model to use. And the model that Apple would have wanted us to use, and the model which I think from a design perspective is the most beautiful, is that we would just make one app called Magic Window, and there would be in-app purchases in it where you could buy additional scenery for your window, and that's it. Easy, clean, one app, one thing to build, et cetera, et cetera. The second option was to have a couple of themed apps. So maybe an app about the Earth because it appeals so universally, but to still have like one main app with in-app purchases. And then finally, to just do a bunch of themed apps. The throw dirt at the fence approach, right? Make 10, 20, 30 different things, see what sticks. And some of those apps could be free, some of those apps could be paid. So this is like literally the first decision that had to be made. And it had to be made in a couple of days. Because with 4 weeks, you can't sit on a decision like this very long. So the thing that kept biting me back and thinking about business model was what happened with Magic Window initially on the iPad. So you can see our little Magic Window icon in the upper left-hand corner. It's just a bunch of colors. And I met in my first 2 months of development with an individual who was looking to develop very similar apps. And he asked me for my feedback, and I said, well, I'm doing one app, Magic Window, because I'm trying to do great design, and I'd really like to win a design award for this. However, if I was thinking about business, I would have just made a whole bunch of apps, because as far as I can tell, that it would have got me a lot more shelf space. He's like, that's good advice. So he just went and made a whole bunch more apps. And to this day, when you search for my product, Magic Window, like 8 of the results are his. Take whatever lesson you want from that. But this was really stuck in my head, and when I was thinking about what to do, I was like, I can't make that same fault again. Like, clearly there is a shelf space advantage to doing what he did. So the decision that I made initially was to do a couple of themed apps and one main app, to do a hybrid compromise. And the thing that was really powerful for us is our iOS app already is an IAP-based app. We already are selling content on the iPhone and iPad. We know how many people prefer each one of these packs and what type of content is generally more appealing than others. Cities versus nature, city name versus country name. We've already tested all these things out. So we actually already know how to cut up the app into multiple apps to throw dirt at the fence. However, then Apple threw this freaking screwball at us that your app can only be 200 megs in size. There's no local storage. You can only use on-demand resources, and the maximum amount of content you can have is 2 gigabytes. Well, how am I supposed to offer our 20 gigabytes of content on a device with only 2 gigabytes maximum storage? Like, Apple wants me to design it one way, but then they built the platform to make it impossible to design it in that way. I think this was one of the single biggest mistakes in the rollout of the Apple TV. I think it was highly over-constraining, and very specifically, because of this constraint, I changed our business model on day 3. Said if Apple doesn't want to give us a platform to build in the way they want to build, then I'm going to build in the way that I know is best for the business. And that's what I did. It's a compromise that's hard to make. So we built a bunch of themed apps. We analyzed which themes from our previous sales were the most popular, and that was our shipping order. And our shipping order was as follows: Earth Lapse, Fireplace, and then everything else. What the fuck? Am I really going to become a Fireplace app developer? So it is hard to swallow. You can understand why. I'm a business. I'm trying to survive. I'm trying to win. I looked at this. I'm like, yeah, that's it. But of course, the other personality of mine, the developer, wasn't as happy. So I made the decision, but I avoided complying with the Fireplace part. And it's amazing how you can sabotage your own business and project. Like, I avoided it at every turn. I talked down on it at every turn. I hid the fact that I was working on it. Like, I was so fundamentally embarrassed. And I realized the moment I knew that something was wrong, I sent one of my friends the initial icon design for Magic Fireplace. Yeah, that's the app. And this was the design. And he was like, "What is wrong with you? That looks like the flames of hell. Like, people are hanging out, like, celebrating Christmas, and, like, put it next to the Holy Bible. That's not good." So I really, I took that feedback. I'm like, damn, you got to get in line. So I had to, do some management intervention with myself. One of the things you got to do as an indie. And what this led to was a bet. This led to a bet. I had a long conversation with a good friend of mine who is an app developer about the real potential for Fireplace apps, whether there was really any money to be made from them, whether I could make any money from them, and we ended up on different sides of the argument, and we decided to agree to make a bet. And it was a friendly wager. The winner of the bet would simply buy the other person dinner. There was nothing more to it than that. This wasn't about making money. It was simply about expressing opinions and challenging them. There were two points to the bet. The first one was that between the launch of the app and January 1st, the app would have to make at least X dollars a day. And the second term was that by January 1st, there will be at least Y Fireplaces in the TV App Store. So it's a two-pronged bet. And if you have to win both to win dinner, that was the rule. So after some debate, the numbers we picked were $35 a day and 40 fireplaces in the App Store by January 1st. So I went to work and made a new icon right away because now I'm inspired. It looks really good next to the Bible. See that on Christmas? Yada 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 yada, no sleep, yada yada yada, near death, wait, I gotta tell the near death story. It's a really good story. So one of the things we did to make the best fireplace on the Apple TV was we filmed the fireplaces ourselves. Okay? And this was necessary, because if we didn't, we'd just be like everyone else, grabbing videos off YouTube and stealing content from places, and I'd already surveyed that content, and I knew it wasn't very good. So I knew the only way to make the best fireplace app in the App Store was to have us actually film the fireplace ourselves. So me and my photography partner Hal split up. He was in Los Angeles, I was in the Bay Area, and we both went around and tried to find more fireplaces to film. We already had a bunch of them in our stock, but we didn't have enough. And Hal, being from Los Angeles, did not really know how to make fires in a fireplace. And if you study like people who are really into making fires in fireplace, there's serious people. Like there's rules and like all this stuff you got to do. People are really intent about it. So after he sent me his first video, and I was like, that fireplace looks terrible. I said, okay, next video. All right, next one. Before you shoot it, I want you to call me on FaceTime and show me the fireplace as you have it set up. And he's like, okay. So he calls me up from Los Angeles, and he's showing me his video. I'm like, dude, you've got the wood all wrong. You got to do it. So I'm trying to talk him through it, and then he explains to me that this fireplace has a special feature. It is a fireplace which can be started by a gas ignition. So it's got a tiny little kind of gas line in the back of it, and you hit a button on the outside, and then that lights your fire. So your fireplace in Los Angeles, where you don't really need a fireplace, can be started much easier. Okay, great. But I was like, we're looking for natural. We're looking for a real fireplace. Like, we don't want to make a gas fireplace. We want to make a real one. I was like, no, dude, trust me. Like, this is very natural. It's just gonna make lighting it a little bit easier. It's not gonna change the video at all. I'm like, dude, why don't you just light it with a match? And he's like, no, dude. Look, let me just show you. Check this out. Looks very natural. So he put down the FaceTime camera, and he walks up to the fireplace, and he's like tinkering around in there, and he hits the ignite button, and all I see on the camera is explosion. And I just started laughing hysterically. Like, what happened might have been very tragic, but the association, it's gonna look natural, dude. And then the explosion was just like so priceless. That was just like absolutely my favorite memory. So the next thing I saw was Hal in the camera checking his eyebrows to see what was burned. It's building apps, man. Building fireplace apps. So yada 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 yada. Magic Fireplace and Earth Labs shipped on Apple TV day 1. Did anybody here ship on Apple TV day 1? 1, 2, a few. Congratulations, guys. You guys knew how hard it was. Whew, that was tough. There's a reason so few people did it, because it was that hard. And I held off on shipping the apps I really wanted to ship for 2 weeks. And this was terribly difficult for me. I put ahead of me apps I was embarrassed. Earth Labs I'm proud of, but Magic Fireplace, oh my goodness. I put a fireplace app in front of like what I really believed in. All right, I'm gonna get this done in 7 minutes. I promise I know there's beer. So after we shipped the fireplace app and Earth Labs, for 4 days, nothing happened. I was checking my sales reports, nothing. There was no top rank, so there was no way to see if the app was performing. And like I started to really break down because I made that fireplace app. Like, come on. And it's funny, I had made an illustration at the time that I labeled Glacial Lake Self-Doubt, because at this point, like, I'd built up all this, I'm sure about this. Something here has to work. Like, it might not make a lot of money, but it has to work. But it wasn't working, or it didn't appear to be working, and I was really coming close to a point of being like, man, if this doesn't work, I don't know what's going on. Then it turns out that I just forgot to import the app's data into app figures, where you had to like go in and check the box. And I didn't notice that until Monday. So Monday I checked the box and I noticed it had made a few sales, and that gave me enough confidence to go mail a few bloggers and mail a few friends and try to get some articles about it. And then 4 days later it was the #1 app in the TV app store, before there was even a top stores chart or a top apps chart. Earth Labs, not fireplace. And then Earth Labs, again, we were number 2 grossing, number 1 paid, and we held out for a long time. I remember when it first hit number 1, some of you probably look at graphs like this all the time. When it first hit number 1, it's like, screenshot it now, it's not going to stay at number 1. We've got like 4 hours at this tops. And then when it dropped back down to number 2, I was like, see guys, I told you it was going to last a couple hours, and then it lasted like weeks. I was right about the Earth and universal appeal, and that really being a great launch product. And I made the right compromise on the Earth. That was correct. But what about the fireplace? Bollocks. So remember the term of the bet, which was 40 fireplaces by January 1st? So when we got our fireplace approved, it was like 2 days before the launch, and I looked in the store and there were no fireplaces. I was like, this is crazy. Like, is the TV store real? We're gonna be the only fireplace at launch. This is nuts. We're gonna be rich. This is awesome. And then, like, in between the time the fireplace got approved and when it went live in the store, 2 other fireplaces popped up, and I was like, oh, here we go. I'd won the second clause of the bet within 3 days. There were more than 40 fireplaces. Almost instantaneously, because it's obvious. And here's the chart. Sucked. The top one is category ranking. That doesn't even mean anything. So going back to the bet, like it was not looking very hopeful. It looked like we were just going to be a wash, that I was going to win on the 40 fireplaces but lose on the 35 a day. And then it happened. So, the subtext to the fireplace is that I had observed Apple featuring one fireplace app in the Mac App Store, the iPhone, and the iPad around Christmas time every year. And they were never really good fireplace apps, but they were the best fireplace. There haven't been really good fireplace apps because people who pride themselves on great development and design are very embarrassed to make a fireplace. So I also knew that no self-righteous iOS designer or developer would ever go after this. So I would be the only person building a fireplace that was high quality. And if Apple was going to feature one fireplace, which they almost certainly would, it would be the one fireplace which was the highest quality. Boom. Number 1. Now they featured it, and of course people are like, well, you cheated, Apple featured it. It's the best fireplace. And it's like honestly, it's the only one that lets you listen to your own music and the fire sound at the same time. And I remember listening to the Release Notes podcast, and they were talking about fireplaces and how none of them let you do this. And the reason is because the other ones were all YouTube videos, and there was no easy way to allow music play through and the YouTube video to play at the same time. So in this case, our self-filming saved us because you could listen to your Christmas music and the fireplace that plays at the same time. We're the only ones who did it. Basic scenario. So I'm proud to show you my greatest trophy at the end of holiday week. That is how you take over. That is how you take over a television network. The interesting thing, so these graphs I'm about to show you, I just made them, and I thought I knew what they were going to show, but I was actually really surprised at how well they made my point. Here are graphs, and it's relative. I'm going to talk it through because that text is tiny. Of each of the apps I shipped. I shipped 9 apps total. On the far right is Earth Labs. Next to it is Magic Fireplace. Next to that is Magic Flowers. And then Electric Sheep, Naturescapes, Cityscapes, down to Countryside, Sunlapse, my less desirable products. Now, if this were poker, it would look like I got a pair of aces to play with. I also have some 9s and 10s. So these are the cards I picked. Pretty good hand. But when you put the numbers together, all of those other apps made less than Earth Labs by like half. And when you put the fireplace together, everything else in Earth Labs did better than everything else. All 8 other apps all added up, including the fireplace, but the fireplace did second best. So I say about universal imagery in the Earth, right? Like, this is not an accident. This is by design. So, in conclusion, it pays to sell out. Thank you. It's really nice to aspire to create products and apps without any consideration for these factors. And it's really a privilege to get to design an app and not have to worry about making money from it. It's a huge privilege. I do feel like before I knew all this stuff, I felt a little more pure. But I was also failing a lot more. And in this case, if I had gone with shipping Magic Window instead of Earth Lapse and Magic Fireplace, I would have made substantially less money. So sometimes you got to make some trade-offs. And one of those for me is having to come up here and say, I made the best fireplace app on Apple fucking TV. Thank you guys very much.